Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. In this episode, we're joined by Bridget Fithian. She's the Executive Director of the Sierra Foothill Conservancy and leader in land conservation across the Central Sierra. Born and raised in Mariposa, Bridget's deep connection to open spaces has shaped her career in conservation, where she has helped protect over 30,000 acres of land through innovative partnerships and creative solutions. Under her leadership, the Sierra Foothill Conservancy has expanded public access to nature, preserved critical landscapes, and played a key role in conservation planning, fire resiliency, and environmental stewardship. Bridget also serves as a board chair of the California Council of Land Trust and holds leadership roles with the Sierra Cascade Land Trust Council and the California Conservation Action Fund. In this episode, we'll explore how land trusts shape conservation, the role of environmental planning, and what it takes to protect and restore California's landscapes for future generations. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, I'm Jessa, and my pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Corinne. My pronouns are she, her.
And today we're joined by Bridget Fithian, who is the Executive Director of the Sierra Foothill Conservancy. Thank you so much for joining us, Bridget.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great, of course. And so first things first, how are you connected to AEP?
So when you asked me that question, I was trying to think about how I am connected to AEP, but the first time I got connected was, I think it was like the 2020 conference. I think it was like a pandemic time conference and it was virtual. And I was a panelist in a session. And it was great because I actually had not had involvement before that. And when I was in that session and participating in the workshop, it turned out that a whole bunch of people I work with are part of AEP, and they were like, "Hi, Bridget," and so I, that was my introduction, and it made me realize how many environmental professionals are involved in your organization and the important role that it plays. So I'm excited to be here talking with you today.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think, Corinne, do you know what the membership number is now? Is it 2,200?
That sounds right, plus or minus a handful, but yeah.
Asterisk around that. Yeah, it's a great network of professionals. And so I'm glad to hear that you were able to get introduced to it and meet fellow professionals and realize you're here too. That's cool.
Yeah.
And can you, so we want to learn more about you and your story and your background. And can you tell us what led you to a career in the environmental profession?
Yeah. So I did not start an academic career with the intention of leading to an environmental profession. So I actually studied literature. So it's sort of the opposite end of the academic spectrum. Most people think well, you must have a degree in science or biology but no. And when I, started studying the humanities, one of the things that I loved about my literature program at UC Santa Cruz was that it really integrated all aspects of disciplines into it. And so, I remember writing papers on, the role that the environment and nature played in, these texts. And that, just sort of came naturally to me. I grew up in the foothills of the Sierra in Mariposa. And so I grew up, running around, climbing rocks and trees, spending time in the outdoors, picking wildflower bouquets for my mom. And so I think part of, my love of this work and career is that it's built into me from the time, that I was a child. And so when I was working for the Park Service, I worked for the Park Service seasonally in Yosemite National Park in Tuolumne Meadows while I was going to college. And during that time, I was reading a book by Bill McKibben called Deep Economy. And it was really opening my eyes to, different ways we could approach trying to address the environmental crises of our time and the realities of climate change. And there's this really fantastic program that the interpretive division of Yosemite National Park puts on in Tuolumne Meadows. And it's a poetry and literature festival. And that year they happened to have Bill McKibben coming to speak. And I was like, what? Bill McKibben, this book that I'm reading. And so I went to his session, and this was when the International Council on Climate Change was just coming out with these, the analysis of the dire situation that we were in. And they were promoting a set of implementable actions that we really needed to take if we were going to curb the curve of climate change. And so there was a One Sky initiative at that time, which outlined every country in the world basically needs to make a commitment to this set of principles if we're going to, avoid the most severe effects of climate change. And so he was promoting this day of climate action on this book tour. And he was like, what we want to see is like every community, anyone can do this all on the same day. All you need to do is be a person who knows some people and organize a rally in your community. And it can take the flavor of whatever the place is where you live. And that's what makes it, appropriate for the place, is that it's built from the ground up. And that's part of like the principles of the deep economy book, is that, wealth comes from interconnected communities and supporting local businesses and creating products locally and really promoting those sort of principles. And I was like, that's Mariposa. He's like, anyone can do this. You can do it. And I was like, me, Bridget Fithian, I can do it. And he's like, yes, you. And so I was like, well, I think we should do this. And so I got together with a bunch of my colleagues in the Park Service and friends, and we organized a climate rally in Mariposa. And we had over 500 people attend, which is huge for our tiny town, right? And we really focused on supporting local businesses, supporting local economy. We also brought a panel of professors from UC Merced up to share about their climate-based research. They were doing, Laura Kippers was doing some research on oak mortality and what we're seeing, in the oak woodland changing. And then Lee Stetson, who's the reenactor of John Muir in Yosemite, I convinced him to do a special presentation for us. And so he developed this whole, reenactment that was John Muir, like returning and seeing the condition of things right now. And what would he say, right? And so it was a great event, and it really set off this spark for me that I could do things, right? And I could do what I know now is called community organizing. And within that time frame, I learned that we had a land trust in our community, and I'd never heard of a land trust. It was a completely new concept to me, but I was like, we have a land trust? Oh my gosh, there's someone in our community that's like saving our beautiful natural lands. And it resonated with me so deeply that there was this organization that was saving the places that are special to me, where I grew up running around, climbing those rocks and trees. And I wanted to be part of it. And so I contacted the organization and said, I'd love to volunteer. I'd love to do an internship. And then I realized that, no one knew about this organization. I was like, I've never heard of this. No one in our community is, like, very few people are engaged with it. And so I came up with a whole list of ideas of what we could do to engage the community and get them connected. Now I know that's called outreach, which is like, the terminology of our division of work. But and I presented that to the executive director, and he was like, I think I'm just going to hire you. And I was like, can you do that? Can you even do that? And he was like, yeah. And so he hired me. I started out doing outreach and membership development, and then I grew with the organization and became the conservation director and was managing all of our acquisitions. And then over time, I moved into the executive director position, and there was a time when my executive director was leaving, who I was very close to. We worked really closely together, and she's now the Big Sur Land Trust executive director. And when she told me she was leaving, I was like, what? This is like a crisis for me. And I think that's like an interesting thing about leadership is that, a lot of times you're not expecting to step into it, but there's a need for it. And then you have the moment to look at yourself and ask yourself, is it my time to step up? And so I had to do that because I didn't want to be an executive director. I was like, that job is crazy and so much work. But I remember I was having a conversation with a coach, and she was like, well, are there things that you want to accomplish with the organization? Are there things that you want to see the organization do? And I was like, yes. She's like, well, you may have an answer there then. I was like, okay. So I applied for the job, and then our organization had done a national search, and they still chose me. So I feel like, they went through their process and hired me, and I've been at Sierra Foothill Conservancy for 17 years now.
That's incredible. That is so inspiring. And I'm sure Corinne has a lot of questions too, because we're both like nodding our heads and like our eyes are lighting up with some of what you're sharing. So, okay, I'm going to step back a minute. So your degree, you went to school to study literature, but you've always just been passionate, I shouldn't say just, you've always been passionate about the environment as just uh, I don't want to say a hobby, but something you care about and you're interested in. And what year, what for the climate rally, what year was that you put that on?
That was 2008, I believe it was.
Because
And it was
when,
called Step It Up is what it was called.
because as you're saying this, I'm thinking this has to be like very early, if not pre-social media days. So being able to plan
Yeah.
something like that, like now it's, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's pretty easy to put something online and promote it. I mean, you still have to attract people and get them there, but to be able to do that grassroots type of movement without the connectivity tools that we have today, I think is really incredible. Um, and it's just I think it's so cool that you went to school for literature, read all these books, like this is what I care about, raised your hand to volunteer, and now you're the executive director. You have been for years. And I just think it's such a good example of what can be done
Yeah.
when you raise your hand and sign up for
Right.
things and speak your mind and your ideas and
Mhm.
share that. I mean, it's good to have other people who listen and believe in you, but I think being like, look at all the things we can do. And obviously the person who's like, I just want to hire you, like saw that passion and talent in you. But I just think that's such an incredible story of where you're at today. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. One of my favorite quotes is a Howard Thurman quote, and it's don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and do that. Because what the world needs are people who've come alive. And I think that, when thinking about career path or what we do with the time that we have, finding the thing that really lights you up is you're going to be the most impactful in that, right? Like because you're going to be passionate, you're going to care about it, and you're going to invest your whole heart into it. And so I love that quote, and I feel like I'm fortunate that I found, that thing that does like really fire me up, right? And have had the great opportunities to take advantage of it.
And right now especially it's hard to find what that next, thing is that's going to motivate, both us and, maybe the next generation. And just, hearing the story of, I was in or working for National Park Service and this program was available. Right now it's really hard to see that happening.
Right.
Circumstances. So I'm wondering, and this might not be a super fair question, but what could the next, thing that inspires, someone or the next generation, or what do you have up your sleeves to try and have that same, spark?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I will just give a shout out to the role of rangers and the role of interpretive rangers, particularly in the Park Service, right? And that they have the power to inspire and connect people to care about our national parks, to care about our environment and our land, and to find a point of entry into that creates a personal connection, right? Because it's a heart level connection that really makes people care about things, right? Like we can say I've got a lot of statistics and they're very meaningful, and they are. But to actually get people to care, they need to have a personal connection and heart level engagement, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think, and that's another, case for the humanities too, right? Is that they provide that, the arts provide that for us. They provide us the entry into, having those type of experiences. So, one is just big shout out for the value and importance of teachers, educators, interpretive rangers, the folks who facilitate those experiences for us. And they're somewhat immeasurable, right? Because you don't necessarily know what's going to make someone feel lit up, but it is those experiences that afford those opportunities. So one thing that we're working on at Sierra Foothill Conservancy is a camp program. So we offer a spring and a summer camp program for students in Mariposa County. And we do this in partnership with our Arts Council. And so the Land Trust and the Arts Council have teamed up to develop a program of camp that includes, arts, place-based learning, science, integrated into a curriculum to try to, create learning opportunities for students, but also those spaces for them to get inspired and get a spark and get connected to the land and, connected to the arts. And one of the parts of our mission that's really important at Sierra Foothill is cultivating the future stewards of the land. And, the work we do is in perpetuity. The land that we preserve, we hold that in perpetuity, which is forever. And so we really need to make sure that we are bringing along next generations to carry the same value that we do today, right? So that's one of the ways that, our organization is, fulfilling that part of our mission and trying to create these pathways for young people to learn about their own backyard, get connected to nature, understand, the value of natural systems, and share a love of this place and this earth.
I think that is such an important activity program with the summer camp, because we, as we said before recording, this is our 50th episode we've recorded, and we get to speak with so many leaders and professionals like yourselves that have these really interesting backstories. And there's so many people that had this, like you said, like this spark, something that happened like when they were usually like earlier in life. And of course it can happen at any time, but the sooner you get exposure to this type of education and information, the earlier like you can make an impact and make a plan and understand. Like part of what we do here is to discuss all the different types of careers and opportunities within the environmental profession. And so having these types of camps to get students there and engaged in learning, and like you said, like light that spark. And I think something you said is like really important, is that we can tell people what to care about, but
Mhm.
telling people to care about and having that innate sense and like drive and passion for, we all care about different things and care about things differently to some extent, but like you said, I can't just tell you you should care about this and you're like, okay, I care now. It's
Right.
having that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such an important thing for us to do. And, sometimes often, conservation is and environmentalism or environmental work, is this can feel like very separate from other parts of society and can feel exclusive, right? And so I think this type of programming where, we give people access and entry to this work and why it matters, it's really important for, our sector, our professions, as well as, everything that we're trying to save and care for. We have to be connecting people. And this is one way that we can do that, right? Is through youth programming.
And on that note, I think, with podcasts a platform. So can you explain more about what a land trust is? Like and what, I guess, kind of the mission and priorities for conservancies and uh just more about what a land trust is for those who aren't as familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. So land trusts are 501(c)(3) organizations, so they're nonprofits. And our focus of our missions is about saving land. It's about conserving special places, and that takes different forms. So there's, many organizations across the state of California that are land trusts doing this work. I'm also the board chair of the California Council of Land Trusts, which is our state association that serves land trusts across California. And we have over 75 organizations that are members of our organization, and that doesn't include all land trusts, right? So there are a lot of these organizations working across the state and covering, a majority of the geography of the state of California. And so each organization has kind of its own flavor. And most of these organizations were developed by, a group of passionate people who cared about the land in their communities and wanted to make sure special places were saved for future generations and for, natural systems. Other goals that folks have, which Sierra Foothill Conservancy has too, is conserving agricultural lands. So for us, rangeland conservation is an important part of the work that we do. And the ranching community in our region, they're some of the most amazing stewards of the land that you could imagine. You go out with a rancher and they're like, okay, this is where the bald eagle nests every year, and there were 2 fledglings this year. They know the land. They spend time with the land. They are intimate with the systems of the land. And so conservation of, these, compatible agricultural practices with natural systems is also a part of what land trusts do. And so there's a few different ways that we protect lands. We do conservation easements, which are a permanent agreement that runs with the title of the land. So it's affixed to the title of the land, just like, a PG&E easement across your land is affixed to the title. And what the conservation easement does is it restricts the development of the land. And then it also puts in place the conservation purposes that this land is being conserved for its natural resources, for its habitat values, for its rangeland values, and that runs with the land in perpetuity. And so the land trust job is to ensure that those terms of the conservation easement are upheld forever. And so, we'll have our first generation landowner who made that decision and decided, like, I love my land so much. I don't want it to ever change. I want to be sure that when I've left this earth, that it will remain the land that I love now, right? And so they enter into those agreements. And then if they pass it on to an heir or if it's sold, the conservation easement stays with the land. So that's a conservation easement. And then we also own nature preserves. And so those are preserves, those are lands that a land trust holds in fee title. So we are the owner of those lands, we operate them. We do restoration projects on them. We may have agricultural engagements. So like grazing is an important part of Sierra Foothill Conservancy's programming, and we use grazing as an ecological tool to, maintain biodiversity on our lands. And then, we host events. We host, like this camp program that I'm talking about for youth. So we bring them out to the preserves. They get to learn all of the unique qualities of the habitats and what their values are. And it's really great. Like we have a program on our McKinsey Preserve in Fresno. And a lot of the students, they've only ever been to like a city park. So when they come out to this nature preserve, they're like, oh my gosh. And it's a first exposure for them to like true nature, and it's just like incredible the things that we like hear them say, and just the joy and the ability to like frolic, amongst the oak trees and, seeing all kinds of different animals that they've never seen before. So that's another part of a land trust work, is that we often have programming like that where we're connecting people to the land, right? So we'll have youth programs, we have hikes and classes and workshops where, we'll have professors or, other folks that have expert knowledge of, ecosystems or geology, come out and lead groups of people for tours of the properties. So, education and outreach is often a part of a land trust role as well. And then we also partner with other agencies. So for instance, land trusts will partner with public utility districts like Sierra Foothill Conservancy does in Mariposa, with the Mariposa Public Utility District. And so we conserve land and restore land in partnership with the public utility district, because that land is the immediate watershed for the town's water source. So a land trust can have a really important role in protecting and enhancing vital resources for communities like water, and doing fire prevention work. So that's, some of the work that a lot of land trusts have been moving into, because our job is to steward the land, right? Like we're holding these properties to ensure that they're not, developed and changed. But as we are living through these dramatic climactic changes, we're also adapting what it means to be the caretakers of these lands, right? Like we've had so many catastrophic fires on SFC conserved lands, whether it's ours or our landowners, that we're now evolving what our role is to, bring in grant funding to support landowners in, creating fire safe plant communities on their properties, and to reduce fuel loads, and to return good fire to their land as well, which is, part of the problem that we are in is from the suppression of fire in California. So, land trusts do a pretty big suite of things. I'm starting to describe restoration, which is another component of the work that we do.
And Bridget, you completely read my mind, because I was going to ask, how has, climate change changed the way that you are managing the land, or, combination of managing and restoring, taking care of your land? I'm wondering also, beyond the catastrophic fire events, is there a way to forward look to, this is the type of, vegetation mix or species mix that we think can survive, in 30 years, 50 years, or how is that factored into what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so it is, it's a really wild time, because Like, for instance, you know, the 17 years that I've been working for Sierra Foothill Conservancy, we had no fires on any of our lands until the last 8 years, I guess I would probably say. So like, this is a really dramatic change of events, right? To go from like, this is not a part of anything that we deal with, to every year one of our properties burns. Like, that's either it's one of our landowners or it's our own land. And so it's a very real experience for our organization and our landowners. And so, you know, we see our role as, you know, caring for the lands that we own in fee title, but also supporting our landowners and in caring for their lands. And so that's definitely been an evolution in our work. And it started with the Karstens fire that we had in Mariposa that burned one of our conservation easements in the Jersey Dale area. And, you know, the landowner was just devastated. He had been and still is an amazing caretaker of that land. And the devastation was just extreme, you know, like white ash up to your knee, you know, just really, really moonscaped out. So that's when we started entering into, you know, helping our landowners to restore burned areas. And that's also when we decided that we needed to get proactive about it and start bringing in resources to, you know, reduce fuel load. One of the things that that we are seeing is, you know, conversion to more chaparral plant communities, and then also conversion to more black oak. So, you know, where we historically have had a yellow pine or a ponderosa pine, you know, dominant forest, and cedar, you know, those being like the two prominent species, we're seeing more of those you know, kind of convert over to chaparral and black oak. So in our region, we're expecting to see more of those transitions take place with climate modeling as well. And so that's another thing too, right? Like, we have to accept that we live in a state of change. Like, California is a state of change, and we're existing in a state of change with, you know, fires and floods and, you know, temperature increases and everything. And so that's another part of adaptive land management, right? Like, we have to embrace the principles of adaptive land management.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes as you're talking, and just there's obviously a lot of consideration points. And I mean, I think this is kind of along the same lines of, as far as like, you know, what Corinne is saying, the next 30, 50 years, and like, what does this look like? And you're thinking of like the land in perpetuity, and with AEP, there's a lot of planners, environmental planners in AEP. And so how can environmental planners and land trusts work together? Like, what is that dynamic? How can land planners, or excuse me, environmental planners be thinking about this?
Yeah. So some of the things that we're starting to do more of is master planning on, you know, preserves and some of the properties. And I think that's one, you know, point of intersection with, you know, environmental planners that is a great space for collaboration. So on the Mariposa Creek Parkway in Mariposa, and then our Stockton Creek Preserve in Mariposa, we are engaging in, you know, grant-funded master planning projects and bringing in consultants to assist with that, because we want to look at the landscape from the perspective of, you know, what are our goals here? And, you know, when we have these publicly accessible lands, we want to, you know, facilitate public access. We want to be making trail considerations. And then we also want to develop good, you know, fuels treatment and, you know, implementation of fire on these properties too, to return the beneficial, you know, qualities of fire to the landscape as well. So I think that you know, in this like state of change that we're in now, and thinking about, you know, what it means to steward the land into the future, that's one of the areas that we're evolving into as an organization that, you know, really benefits from having planning professionals engaged in it for sure.
Another aspect that I get to see, pretty closely is working with land trusts to implement, prescribed mitigation for projects.
Yes.
And, Bridget, what you said about, landowners, especially in including, ranching landowners really know their land. And there's so much care taken and, working with land trust landowners like that really makes our job a lot easier to, first of all, make sure that we know what is on the land now and then what the future can look like so that we can be sure that, mitigation efforts are going to the, requisite and direct benefit of the species that we are trying to mitigate for. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And that's another area of the work is mitigation. So environmental mitigation is another big part of some land trusts. For Sierra Foothill, that's a big part of the work that we do as well. So that's a place where we intersect, you know, with planning professionals as well. And, you know, one of the things that's really a great opportunity, if you are a, you know, a biological consultant or a planning consultant that is presented with, you know, say you're doing the mitigation requirements or you're helping to fulfill those for a new development or a road, get together with your local land trust because we oftentimes have lands that we're trying to conserve or restore that can fulfill the needs that your client may have. And for Sierra Foothill Conservancy, what we're doing is we're taking mitigation and weaving it into our large landscape level conservation goals, right? So we're one of the core principles of our land protection is to establish connected corridors of conserved lands from the Central Valley to the Sierra Crest. And so we've been doing that in the San Joaquin River corridor. We've been doing that in the Chowchilla River corridor and also the Merced River corridor. And there's a lot of large pieces of that that are actually mitigation, right? But they, instead of being like a postage stamp mitigation out here, that's just in the middle of whatever, you know, that could become any other land use surrounding it in the future, it's connected to other lands that are preserved in perpetuity. So you really like maximize the benefits of that mitigation if you can work with a partner like a land trust who is, you know, having a larger strategy that you could weave into.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say we're probably about at our time. So if there's anything else, I want to give you some space if there's anything else to add before we get into our wrap up rapid five.
Oh yeah. So I think the other piece that, you know, we haven't talked a lot about, I'd say policy work and then partnering with indigenous communities and tribes are like the two things that we haven't really talked about. So, you know, just first of all, the policy work is another part of, you know, what land trusts are engaged in that is really critical. So, you know, the voters passed Prop 4 this past November, and I was a board member on the Prop 4 board, and I'm also the board president of the California Council of Land Trust Action Fund. And so we were generating, you know, revenue to support the campaign for Prop 4, and we're really excited about that success. It is, you know, it's a $10 billion natural resources bond, which is the largest that we've ever had in the state of California. And it couldn't come at a more important time, right? We look at the fires in LA, we look at, you know, what's been happening across the Sierra Nevada, and it's so clear that those resources and those projects are what is needed for our state to build a sustainable future. So I just want to give it up to the voters of California for
Yes.
having the foresight to know that that's an important investment for us and our whole sector, all of the environmental community we'll be doing a lot of very important work that's going to come from those resources. So, policy, really key part of, how we do the work that we do, whether it's funding policy or it's legislation that, advances the needs of the conservation community. That's a really vital role that the California Council of Land Trusts plays across the state. And then the other thing that, I would share that's been a, growing part of the work of land trusts is partnerships with tribes. And this, can take many forms, but, we're really excited. We're celebrating a project that we just completed with the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation. And it's the return of a village site and ancestral homelands for the first time in 175 years.
Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So the Big Rock, or Iaku, which is Manzanita, which is one of the, prominent and important species on the land, project, we conserve a Southern Sierra Miwok Nation, and it was funded by the Wildlife Conservation Board. So want to give a shout out to WCB also for really making that project happen for us.
Well, it's fantastic too, because we taped a podcast not too long ago with another guest who said, in response to how can we, the non-tribal community be better partners with tribe? And she's like, it's really simple. It's land back. So it's so cool to, now in taping of this podcast, get an example of it in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really like listening to what your tribe wants and needs, right? Like that's a lot of times we come to partnership with like a fully formed idea of what we want to accomplish. And I think that's one of the biggest faux pas, right? When working with tribes, especially, is that we really want to ask and listen to what the tribe wants and needs. And so our Mariposa Creek Parkway project is another example of tribal partnership work. And so that's a partnership between the Land Trust, the tribe, the county, and the Arts Council. And so it's weaving in, all of those parties' interests into this landscape. And a big part of that has been a restoration effort where we've removed the invasives to make space for the native species, but we've also, done a massive replanting and restoration of the riparian corridor. And then that is becoming a space for the tribe to continue to tend and harvest and have access to. So we're excited about that. And we do have a documentary that we've been doing over the course of, the last year and a half. And we have a premiere coming up in Mariposa for that. And it's going to be hosted at one of our local haunts, the Grove House. And that's going to be at the end of March. It's March 27th. I'm saying the date right. So that's another thing we're really excited about. And our filmmaker, Amanda Law, and her company, Lovely Films, did a great job on that piece for us.
Yay. And for those who aren't local, will there be a place they can access it after the premiere?
Yeah, so after we do the premiere, we will have the video accessible. I think we'll have it up on a couple different platforms, and folks will be able to access it from our website, which is www.sierrafoothill.org. And if people want to come to the premiere, look for information on our website about that, or our social media as well.
Yay, we love that. Well, what a great place to wrap up. And I know there's so much to talk about, and we're just scratching the surface of all the work that you and the Conservancy and the Land Trust have done over the last however many years, and what you're doing in the future. But in the interest of time, we will get into the wrap up rapid five. And for the first question, what is your favorite daily habit?
I mean, I'm a mom, so snuggling my children is like probably my favorite thing every day. But as far as like nature goes, I think, getting outside and observing what's happening on the land. What birds do I hear and see? What's happening with the weather? And just, our lives are so busy, and just taking a moment to check in with what's happening in the natural world. That's another one of my favorites.
I love that. What are 3 things you would bring to a deserted island?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. Let's see. Well, I think one would be a survival kit. So we should probably start with that, with anything I would need, right? I've got my knife, I've got my fire starter, etc. I think I would bring an instrument and try to learn how to play it, which I don't play an instrument. So maybe that. And I would bring my family.
There you go. Entertainment and survival and company. I love all that. What is your favorite environmental policy?
Whoa. Okay. Oh boy, I don't know. I think that the environmental policy that establishes conservation easements is a pretty powerful one. And all of the case law that supports them. I think that's a really key, instrument of our sector. And, at the moment, Prop 4 and the legislation that supported that is, the most important thing. So I say those 2.
Yeah. What is your favorite flora or fauna?
Oh, Mariposa lupin. So
Okay.
yeah, it's a very specific flower, Lupinus citrinus deflexus, and its population is entirely restricted to Mariposa, and so that's definitely my favorite flower.
Oh, I just looked it up. It's beautiful. So you said this.
This may also be the first time we've gotten the full scientific Latin name of a flora or fauna. So a good
That's
match for
you're
our
right.
50th episode.
Yeah.
The literature person is ready with that.
The bar has been set. All right. And then finish this sentence. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Oh, wouldn't it be cool if everyone got along and did what was rational?
Well, thank you so much, Bridget. We appreciate you joining us and learning from you. It was very inspiring to hear all the amazing work you're doing, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And congratulations on your 50th episode.
Woo-woo.
It's great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released, and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.